What's going on YouTube? Listen up, young elder gang. This is Dr. Archie Rosenberg at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes. In this video, you will find history, definitions, scripture, information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning, the truth. Keep in mind this content used in this video is intended for entertainment, educational and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button, young elder gang. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Hit that bell and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. The Empire of the City, 3 city-states, London, the Vatican and the District of Columbia. The Empire of the City consists of 3 cities which belong to no nation or state and pay no taxes. Vatican City, the City of London, inside London, and Washington, D.C. Vatican City controls the world through religion, the City of London controls the world through currency, and Washington, D.C. controls the world through force. The City of London, or the square mile, is a plot of land approximately a square mile in London. It is independent from England and is ruled by the City of London Corporation. Located in the centre of each city is an Egyptian obelisk erect. They are the obelisk in St. Peter's Square, the Washington Monument, and Cleopatra's Needle in the City of London. One question that immediately springs to mind is, why is there an Egyptian obelisk which is a tribute to the Egyptian sun god Amen-Ra in the middle of Vatican City? Contained within these 3 cities is more than 80% of the world's wealth. The Empire of the City is essentially the British Empire, or more accurately, the forces behind the British Empire of the past. The empire asserts its control over its colonies, such as the US, Canada, Australia, the European Union, through complicated means. One of their means of control is to have agents of their cause in high places of influence. This cabal of powerful manipulators is known collectively as the Illuminati, the shadow government, the Omega Agency, the government within the government, and so on. It does not matter what they are called. They are there and have been actively and legislatively writing away our freedoms, and also have been working towards the New World Order. Examples of this is the Patriot Acts, H.R. Bill 1955, the European Union Constitution, and the Security and Prosperity Partnership. Did the world wars, revolutions, and big events of human history evolve naturally, or were they calculated and pre-planned? If they were pre-planned, who planned them, and what are they planning for the future of humanity? The answer to this puzzling question can be found within the boundaries of 3 of the world's most powerful cities. Those 3 cities belong to no nation and pay no taxes. They are Washington's District of Columbia, which is not part of the City of Washington or of the United States. The inner City of London, which is not part of London or England, and the Vatican City, which is not part of Rome or Italy. These cities, called city-states, have their own independent flag, their own separate laws, and their own separate identity. Before we get more into it, let me give you some game. Leading up to the American Revolution, one of the colonists' chief complaints about the British Empire was that it imposed taxation without representation, a slogan that Washington, D.C. has since adopted as its unofficial motto. Washington, D.C. is the ancestral home of the Nacotchtank People, also known as Anacostans. After British colonists drove them out of their land, it became part of Maryland and Virginia. In 1790, both of these states ceded the territory to establish the District of Columbia as the capital of the United States. At the time, there were about 3,000 people living in D.C., too few to become a state, and white men who owned property in D.C. continued to vote in either Maryland or Virginia as they had before. The U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, instructed that the seat of government be a district not exceeding 10 miles square, over which Congress would exercise exclusive legislation. James Madison spelled out the reason for the arrangement, explaining that maintaining an isolated district would prevent any state from holding too much power by being home to the national government. During Reconstruction, the Nacotchtank People, who now had been reclassified as blacks, Negroes, colored, black Americans, and later African Americans, made up about a third of DC's population. They were never slaves, they were prisoners of war, also called POW. POW is an abbreviation for prisoner of war, a term used to describe someone who is captured by the armed forces of an enemy during wartime. POWs can be combatants or non-combatants. such as militia members, volunteers, war correspondents, or civilians. The Geneva Conventions protect prisoners of war and state that they should be treated humanely, removed from combat zones, and not held for trial. However, POWs have historically been vulnerable to abuse, including beatings, starvation, and poor living conditions. The term prisoner of war was first used in 1620. The status of POWs has improved over time, with the first multilateral treaty to protect them being the Geneva Convention on Prisoners of War in 1929. Keep in mind, the Nacotchtank People were not a part of the United States Corporation, but now as black people they could beg to vote in the Wizard of Oz system. They staged for one black man to win the right to vote in local DC elections in 1867. This backfired on them because the Nacotchtank People, as blacks, quickly established themselves in the city's local government. Congress responded by dismantling that government through new laws in 1871 and 1874 that gave the president, whom DC residents still couldn't vote for, the sole power to appoint DC leaders. The president could consult with Congress when appointing these leaders, but because DC voters couldn't elect voting members of Congress, they had no way to influence these decisions. The president, congressmen, and many federal staff members remained immune to these changes because they were registered to vote in their home states. DC's restrictions on voting and self-governance only applied to full-time residents, and like the voting restrictions that southern states used to prevent so-called black men from voting after Reconstruction, these restrictions were specifically designed to suppress the Nacotchtank People, who tried to get a leg up as so-called black people and gain political power. Now, before we get into breaking more down about the three cities-states, let's talk UCC. UCC stands for Uniform Commercial Code, a set of laws that govern commercial transactions in the United States. The UCC is a state law that has been adopted by all states, which allows businesses to have confidence that their contracts will be enforced consistently across the country. The UCC's purpose is to make business activities more efficient and consistent across the country. It covers a range of business transactions, including the sale of goods, secured transactions, and commercial paper. The UCC is organized into 11 articles, each with a self-explanatory title. The UCC also includes UCC filings, which are forms that parties use to notify the public of a business transaction. UCC filings are important because they help to protect a party's position if something goes wrong with the business deal. Creditors can use UCC filings to notify other creditors about a debtor's assets that are being used as collateral. If the UCC is the law of the land in America, then how does it pertain to me because I am not living in commerce? If the UCC was written and owned by the Vatican International Institute for the Unification of Private Law, how is that legal in America? According to PL 88-243, the UCC is law of the land of Washington, D.C. It's a well-known fact that Washington, D.C. is not a part of America and has never been. So if the UCC is law of land for the Federal Corporation of the United States, how does this apply to the 50 Union states? Public law was converted to public policy in 1938. Does public policy only deal with corporation? Yes, is the real answer. So how does public policy pertain to me as I am not a corporation? Why does the United States pay $260,000 a year to Unidroit for the use of the UCC? Is Unidroit owned by the Vatican? The International Institute for the Unification of Private Law, Unidroit, is an independent intergovernmental organization that aims to harmonize and modernize private and commercial law. Unidroit's purpose is to study and formulate uniform law instruments, principles and rules to modernize, harmonize, and coordinate private and commercial law. Unidroit has 65 member states from 5 continents, representing a variety of legal, economic, and political systems. Unidroit is located in the Villa Aldobrandini in Rome, Italy. Unidroit cooperates with other international organizations, including the Hague Conference on Private International Law and the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, UNCITRAL. Is Washington, D.C. not a part of the 3 city-state empire that rules the world? The City of London, the City of Rome, and Washington, D.C., the Empire of the City. A. The Uniform Commercial Code, UCC, is a set of laws that provide legal rules and regulations governing commercial or business dealings and transactions in the United States. It is important to understand that the UCC is not the law of the land, in the sense of being the overarching law applicable to all aspects of life. Instead, it is a collection of laws that standardize and harmonize commercial transactions across the states. The UCC has been adopted in some form by all 50 states in the US, making it a significant legal framework for commercial transactions. Its adoption is not related to the Vatican or the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law, UNIDROIT. The UCC was created by two private legal organizations, the American Law Institute and the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws, to harmonize state laws in the US. Public Law 88, 243, which you mention, refers to the act of Congress that facilitated the adoption of the UCC in the District of Columbia. However, this does not mean that the UCC only applies to Washington, D.C., or that D.C. is not part of the United States. Your reference to public policy and corporations seems to confuse the scope of the UCC. The UCC primarily deals with commercial transactions which can involve both individuals and corporations. Therefore, it can be relevant to individuals who are not corporations but are engaged in commercial activities. Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. It's really the new Roman Empire. Mystery Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. The corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically, militarily, and spiritually through London, Washington, D.C., and the Vatican, respectively. Washington, D.C.'s flag is white with 3 red stars at the top, above 2 red horizontal bars. Some say the flag's design is based on President George Washington's family coat of arms. The Washington coat of arms featured 3 red stars above 2 red horizontal bars on a silver background, according to the website for Mount Vernon, Washington's historic Virginia home. The person credited with designing the flag, Charles A.R. Dunn, later wrote that it felt natural that the Washington coat of arms be the inspiration for the District of Columbia flag. The Vatican in Rome is the smallest independent state in the world and home to the Roman Catholic Church's spiritual leaders, including the Pope. The Vatican and the Catholic Church have long been topics of intrigue and the subject of power because of their history of secrecy and scandal. And Washington, D.C. and London are capital cities, not independent states. The phrase Empire of the City appears to stem from a book titled The Empire of the City, the Jekyll Hyde nature of the British government. The book centers London as the city. Vatican City is in fact a state, the smallest principality in the world. It lies on the banks of the Tiber, completely surrounded by the city of Rome. Banks of the Tiber refers to the riverside areas along the Tiber River, most notably in the city of Rome, Italy, where the river is a prominent geographical feature. Essentially, it means the land bordering the Tiber River. Its status as a separate state emerged from the Lateran agreements of February 1929. It has its own newspaper postal service, radio and television station, its own flag and a population of about 1,000. The Vatican also has its own army of Swiss guards, and it even has its own prison. The Vatican rules over approximately 2 billion of the world's 8.1 billion people. The colossal wealth of the Vatican includes enormous investments with the Rothschilds in Britain, France and the USA, and with giant oil and weapons corporations like Shell and General Electric. The Vatican's solid gold bullion worth billions is stored with the Rothschild-controlled Bank of England and the US Federal Reserve Bank. The Catholic Church is the biggest financial power wealth accumulator and property owner in existence, possessing more material wealth than any bank, corporation, giant trust, or government anywhere on the globe. The Pope, who is the visible ruler of this colossal global wealth, is one of the richest men on earth, while 2/3 of the world earns less than $2 a day, and 1/5 of the world is underfed or starving to death. The Vatican hoards the world's wealth, profits from it on the stock market, and at the same time preaches about giving. How did the Pope and Vatican accumulate all that wealth over the millennium? One method was to put a price tag on sin. Many bishops and popes actively marketed guilt, sin, and fear for profit by selling indulgences. Worshippers were encouraged to prepay for sins they hadn't yet committed and get pardoned ahead of time. Those who didn't pay up risk eternal damnation in Satan's oven. Pope Leo X rebuilt St. Peter's Basilica, selling tickets out of hell and tickets to heaven during the Dark Ages. The Catholic Church not only hoarded the wealth they collected from the poor, but hoarded knowledge they kept the masses ignorant and in the dark by denying them a basic education during World War II. The Vatican was criticized for supporting Hitler in his Nazi regime. To this day, the Vatican is still under investigation for plundering Nazi gold from the Swiss bank accounts of Jewish Holocaust victims. Over the past 5 decades, more than 1,500 priests and bishops have been identified in the sexual assault of tens of thousands of boys and girls in their trusting congregations and orphanages. Why is this filthy rich institution preaching spiritual values of poverty and chastity, while cardinals, bishops, and priests cover up their crimes of sexual abuse? Why has the Church fought and resisted the compensation claims of their sexually, emotionally, and spiritually traumatized victims? Like Vatican City, London's inner city is also a privately owned corporation or city-state located right smack in the heart of Greater London. It became a sovereign state in 1694 when King William II of Orange privatized and turned the Bank of England over to the bankers. By 1812, Nathan Rothschild crashed the English stock market and took control of the Bank of England. Today, the city-state of London is the world's financial power centre and the wealthiest square mile on the face of the earth. It houses the Rothschild Control Bank of England, Lloyd's of London, the London Stock Exchange, all British banks, the branch offices of 385 foreign banks and 70 US banks. It has its own courts, its own laws, its own flag and its own police force. It's not part of Greater London or England or the British Commonwealth and pays no taxes. The city-state of London houses Fleet Street's newspaper and publishing monopolies. It is also the headquarters for worldwide English Freemasonry and headquarters for the worldwide money cartel known as the Crown. Contrary to popular belief, the Crown is not the royal family or the British monarch. The Crown is the private corporate city-state of London. It has a council of 12 members who rule the corporation under a mayor called the Lord Mayor, and his 12-member council serve as proxies or representatives who sit in for 13 of the world's wealthiest, most powerful banking families. This ring of 13 ruling families includes the Rothschild family, the Warburg family, the Oppenheimer family, and the Schiff family. These families and their descendants run the Crown Corporation of London. The Crown Corporation holds the title to worldwide Crown land in Crown colonies like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The British Parliament and the British Prime Minister serve as a public front for the hidden power of these ruling Crown families. Like the city-state of London and the Vatican, a third city-state was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia and is located on 10 square miles of land in the heart of Washington. The District of Columbia flies its own flag and has its own independent constitution. Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically, through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori. The Lex Fori is a Latin legal term that refers to the law of the jurisdiction where a legal case is being heard. It is the law that applies to procedural matters such as how to file a lawsuit, how to collect evidence, and how to enforce a judgment. The Lex Fori is generally accepted to apply to procedural issues regardless of the law that applies to the merits of the case. The Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the US Constitution when Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been and still is a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just the King James Version of the Bible, but for signing the first Charter of Virginia in 1606. This charter granted British forefathers a license to steal, rob, settle and colonize America lands. On April 10, 1606, King James I of England granted the following charter to the investors of the Virginia Company of London. It permitted them to settle a swath of the North American coast and led to the establishment of Jamestown a year later. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians after America declared its independence from Great Britain. The Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence, although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies. He kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like King or Prince or Baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the King. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Feds or Federal Reserve is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschild, Warburg Kühnen, Astors, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Lee's in China, the Lehman Brothers, and etc. This private banking cartel is the Feds and is never audited, never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays stolen symbols of the ancient Moors, who are the real Egyptians. They have on this money the words "In God we trust." Who exactly is the God they trust? These guys don't believe in any God. They say they are God. This stuff is really funny. They also collect American taxpayers' money through the IRS. Then they loan it back again with interest to pay for road, bridges, and other public works. American presidents are handpicked and financed by these special interest power groups like George W. Bush. John Forbes Cary, whose initials are JFK, is a member of Yale University Skull and Bones Brotherhood. The Forbes part of John Carr's name identifies his descendancy from Captain Robert Bennett Forbes, who is a drug runner for the Rothschilds' opium drug trade with China in the 1800s. Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the president is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country, it is a corporation, and the president is president of the corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people, since the United States is a corporation who owns the corporation of the United States, like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen and whose land is called Crown Land. The United States is just another crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, fic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward in D.C. city-state. The obelisk, known as the Washington Monument, was dedicated to Freemason George Washington by the Freemason Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. The secretive Brotherhood of Freemasons laid the Washington obelisk cornerstone in 1848 and contributed 22 Masonic memorial stones. 250 Masonic lodges financed the Washington Monument obelisk. Including the Knights Templar Masonic Order at the heart of London city-state, is a 187-ton, 69 feet tall, Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames in Vatican City. Another Egyptian obelisk towers high above St. Peter's Square.